All right, programming 12. Now that we have a character that is in our world, what we can use is the old translate and push pop matrix in order to center the drawing of the world on the character itself. So that'll actually be pretty straightforward. Let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to put this in a separate function. World.step and world.draw is where the world is drawn, and I want to sort of put that somewhere else. I guess world.step technically doesn't need to be in there, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, so I'm just going to put it there for now, and maybe I'll make some changes later. So I'm going to make a void draw world, and I'll stick this stuff in here. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's about to get busier. There's going to be more steps in there. So I don't want my draw function to get uglier. Especially because later on I'll probably make this into some kind of mode framework, and I don't want to have all these details, sandwiched in there. It's going to get annoying to have so much code in one place. So I like to keep things nice and bite-sized. So draw world is basically these two things. So now I'd like to make it a little more interesting. I'd like to put a push and pop matrix around it. And then I can do some translating. So I can choose to translate to a new position, and I would like to translate to my character. So if we do that, you'll see that it's not quite as simple as that. So I can say translate, and I can say player.getX. Player.getY. So that seems like a reasonable first start. And if I run this, we'll see a couple of things are going on. You'll see that the camera, this kind of idea of a camera has shifted, but it's kind of weird. Like as I move the character, I don't even know if we can see it. My character is too far away. Just try loading it again. You can see that as we fall, the camera looks like it's moving up, and as I move to the right, the camera seems to move to the left, and I can't even really get myself to stay on screen because the map isn't in a very convenient location. So what's going on here? So basically, what's going on is, when we are the character, if we move to the left, we want visually the world to move to the right. If we move to the right and the world moves to the right, then that's exactly what we're seeing here. So I'm pressing move, say, when the character's falling, right? It's going down. I don't want the world to go, down. I want to reverse that so that we get that synchronization happening. So what you can do instead is translate to the negative of the player's X and Y. So that when we move, the world sort of moves in the opposite direction. And you'll see that it kind of works, except that we're in the top corner here. So now you'll notice that I get kind of stuck. You can see my character, he's kind of in the corner there. The world is moving and is, kind of focusing on the character. There's a kind of camera that is attached to that. So as the character moves around, it moves. And as I was falling, let's run it again, we'll see that the camera follows it, so it goes down. It works just fine. So that's good. But, we're kind of stuck in the top corner, right? That's where the 0, 0 is by default, and of course translates moving 0, 0. So if we want to avoid that, we can just sort of add on, half the width for X and half the height, just to center it. Oops. Yeah, does that make sense, folks? You're just basically shifting the camera to the center of the screen that way. And now we can see the character is kind of locked in the center. If I move left and right, the character also moves left and right. And the camera moves right and left. It's kind of actually the opposite. But that's how it should feel. That's what creates that illusion. When I go left, the world goes right. When I go right, the world goes left. So everything now kind of syncs up. There's a couple other things we might want to do, and that is we would like to zoom in. Grid size isn't really a way of zooming. We had this grid size variable that we were changing, but we do want to keep grid size at a certain number because the textures we load are going to be a certain size, right? So we'd like that to probably match with the textures that we use. Otherwise, they'll get pixelated and stuff and shrunk down. But we can use the scale function to sort of zoom in and out without affecting the actual quality of the textures. So what I'd like to do is also put in a scale. Now I'll just put in scale 1 here just to show you nothing really wrong happens if I scale, because that's just scaling to 1. But if I scale, say, to 2, everything should double in size and things get a little bit hectic. So if I zoom in, you'll see, oh, we didn't zoom in on the character. And when we move, things are kind of out of proportion. You see the character kind of moved off the screen. And the reason is because we're not taking our scale into account in our translate. Now that we've zoomed in double, we need to move twice as much. Like the world is still just moving as much as the player is moving. We want to move the world twice as much now that we're scaled in by a factor of 2. So we can just put in our multiply by 2 here and here. So we're just multiplying really this by 2, and then afterwards adding on the height and width. So now you can see the character is zoomed in and the camera is attached. We can make this a little more abstract by making this a variable, and then we can just change the scale factor as we see fit, and we can even have that in animation, like it could be zooming in and out maybe with a key press or whatever. So I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to call it, I guess I'll make it a float because it might be a decimal. I'll call it zoom, and we'll make it 1.5 to start with, just as a number to choose. And then what we can do is we can put in zoom here, and we'll multiply by zoom, and we'll multiply by zoom. So if we run this, we can see we're kind of scaled at 1.5. Everything's nice. And if we were to change zoom factor, programmatically, maybe with a key press or for whatever reason, and then that would adjust and zoom in and out, and our translate would still be synchronized. So there you go. Now we have a world that we can explore. My character can't explore it because he can't jump, but hopefully you've added jump in for yours. And then that should make our game a lot more fun now that we can sort of move around and explore it. Okay, so we kind of have a platformer. Like we have a really basic platformer, and I think the next step that we're going to be exploring is going to be looking at extending more F boxes. So there's all sorts of tropes of platformer games. Think about your favorite platformer game. There are switches that turn things on and off. There are bridges that collapse as you run across them. There's lava that if you fall into, you die, And of course, that's just terrain. There's also, enemies, classic kinds of enemies. And really, all those things are going to be our types of F boxes. So we'll be extending those and sort of making our game start to look more like, a platformer and less like a bunch of boxes that are kind of sitting around and doing nothing. So I look forward to doing that with you in our coming lessons. Okay, thanks everybody.